Hi, and welcome to Module 3 of the Training for High Fidelity Wraparound Providers Working in Wyoming's Juvenile Courts. This module will cover CHINS proceedings and is the third of 6 modules for high fidelity wraparound providers working in Wyoming's juvenile courts. This is an overview of the court and DFS processes and the timeline from day 1 through day 365 of a typical CHINS or delinquency case. The blue arrow shows the time. The light brown boxes at the top show the DFS processes, and the dark brown boxes at the bottom show the court processes and how they line up. We'll be going through the details of this, but here's an overview of how it all fits together. Wyoming Statute 146402A4 defines CHINS as any child who has not reached his 18th birthday, who is habitually truant or has run away from home, is habitually disobeys reasonable and lawful demands of his parents, guardian, custodian, or other proper authority, is ungovernable and beyond control, or has committed a status offense. The court has authority to determine legal custody, order parties to perform, or other parties to refrain in a CHINS case, just like in an abuse neglect case. The Department of Family Services has probation officers or caseworkers who are responsible for supervising youth involved in CHINS proceedings. The DFS caseworker communicates, provides, and coordinates services for the family and makes recommendation to the court regarding services for the family. DFS policies can be located at the web address on the slide. DFS receives notification of filing of a delinquency or CHINS proceeding from the district attorney or county attorney. The DFS caseworker conducts an intake, gathering necessary information through receipt of court information, and adds the information to the DFS data system within 7 days of receipt of the report. They then check DFS records in order to obtain pertinent information, including any previous DFS involvement, and the supervisor assigns the case to a caseworker after the initial hearing or court order for DFS involvement. The DFS caseworker also makes collateral contacts for the purpose of collecting additional information for use in case planning, and also uses information collected to complete the PACT or Positive Achievement Change Tool assessment. Information gathered at intake is useful to others, such as the court, the district or county attorney, and the youth attorney, and will serve as a foundation for the predispositional report and the Youth Empowered Success, or YES, case plan. The intake may also identify issues that require further investigation or more clinical assessment at a later date. The DFS caseworker also must initiate contact with the youth and family within 7 calendar days after the initial court hearing, ordering DFS involvement, and the DFS caseworker must explain the allegations in the complaint and explain that the intake is meant to assess, but that services are voluntary at that point. The PACT assessment is an evidence-based risk and needs assessment and case planning tool. The underlying philosophy of the PACT assessment is the reduction of recidivism and placement rates by helping youth under supervision increase their personal accountability and make positive changes in their attitudes and behaviors, thereby adding to community protection. The PACT assessment is used as a guide in determining the most appropriate course of action and case planning for each youth by examining levels of risk to reoffend based on risk and protective factors. It's also used by a DFS caseworker in identifying targets of intervention, monitoring youth progress, and case management. The PACT assessment is also used in conjunction with professional skills and judgment, and shall be used on is used on all DFS juvenile services supervised cases. And the pre-assessment may be completed at intake. It is administered by certified DFS caseworkers. Some CHINS clients are involved in intensive supervision programs, also called ISP. ISP gives the Department of Family Services and the juvenile courts an alternative to out-of-home placement or incarceration. It's covered in Wyoming Statute 14.6.309 through 314. It's a balanced approach to supervision, which is designed to enhance public safety. It promotes youth accountability, intensive treatment services, and long-term behavioral change by the youth while maintaining commitment to public safety. It focuses on evaluating a youth assets and liabilities, identifying problems, and classifying risks to the community so that appropriate decisions are made in supervision of the youth. To be eligible, a youth has to be classified as high risk or high need, as demonstrated by the PACT or deemed appropriate by a DFS, ISP, caseworker, supervisor, or district manager. This is the juvenile court process at a glance that was covered in Module 1. We'll be going through the specific hearings as relating to a CHINS case following. The first hearing is a shelter care initial hearing or detention hearing report. The purpose of this report is to provide necessary information on the CHINS case to juvenile court. When a child is removed, they must notify the district attorney and provide them with a copy of the report. The report shall include all the same information that's included in the report that was covered in the abuse and neglect module. In a CHINS case, you may see public defenders involved. A public defender defends indigent people charged with or convicted of a crime, and also delinquent act in both CHINS and delinquency cases. So when a child is charged in a CHINS or delinquency case, they have a right to an attorney, and if they cannot afford one, then they are appointed a public defender. The court determines whether the person's financial circumstances require the appointment of a public defender, and once appointed, the agency must provide representation. Attorney GALs in Wyoming represent children in the hybrid model of representation unless the child in a CHINS or delinquency has a district attorney. Then the attorney GAL represents only the child's best interests. So a public defender would represent what the child wants, and a GAL would represent what's in the child's best interest. The first hearing is a shelter care hearing. This is only held if temporary protective custody is taken or the child is in detention, and then it's sometimes also called a detention hearing, but they're the same hearing, and has to be held within 48 hours of that custody being taken, whether it's protective custody or detention. Written notice with time, place, and purpose of the hearing must be given to the child and parents, guardian, or custodian. The court will then determine whether shelter care or detention is required to protect the child's welfare pending further proceedings, and also will be informed if the child is potentially of Native American descent, and therefore the Indian Child Welfare Act would apply. 14.3.409 addresses shelter care hearings. Next is the initial appearance. This is where the rights for the respondents are explained to the child, both their right to counsel, right to copy of charges against him or her, the right to confront and cross-examine witnesses, right to introduce evidence, to present witnesses, and issuance of process. They're also advised of the specific allegations in the petition, advised of the liability for costs of treatment and services, and sometimes they have the opportunity to admit or deny the allegations. Can also have a shelter care and initial hearing together, and the case may be held in abeyance by consent decree. If an admittance is accepted during this hearing by the judge, if the person admits, they go to the dispositional hearing, and if they deny, then we go to an adjudication. The adjudication is the court's formal ruling on a disputed matter. The burden of proof in a CHINS case is beyond a reasonable doubt and is covered in 14.6.425. It can be a bench or jury trial and should be set within 60 days after removal of the child. If they are adjudicated as a CHINS child, they'll move on to dispositional hearing, and if it's not adjudicated, the case is dismissed and the charges against the child are gone. A family service plan, also known as a case plan, is a document created in partnership with the family and in collaboration with formal and informal supports. It may be created during a family team meeting, MDT, or other appropriate meeting. It's required for all open cases. It needs to be family-centered, strengths-based, individualized, culturally competent, comprehensive, reflective of community partnerships, and outcome-based. It should establish measurable goals and steps that specifically address the needs of the entire family while incorporating the safety, well-being, and permanency for the child. A yes case plan has the same purpose as the family service plan and is required for all open probation cases. It stands for Youth Empowered Success. It must be completed within 30 days of adjudication and should be reviewed every 90 days. A consent decree is an agreement by the parties that the allegations are held in abeyance. A CHINS consent decree requires the consent of the district or county attorney, the child's legal representation, and the child, with notification to the parent. They are limited to 1 year in length. They must be in writing and include a family service plan. They can be revoked for failure to comply, and they may be accepted with or without an admission of guilt or liability. A predisposition report is completed by the Department of Family Services at order of the court and completed prior to the dispositional hearing. In cases alleging CHINS, the predispositional report, or PDR, has to include the offense, official and the juvenile's version, the victim impact statement, and prior offense history. They have to complete the PDR by summarizing the significant findings of the investigation and also should include a recommendation for family service plan or yes case plan. Next is a dispositional hearing. A dispositional hearing decides questions such as the child's current living situation, who has legal custody, and what services the child and family may need. It can be held immediately after adjudication or admission, or within 60 days after. Before placing a child outside of the home, the court has to find by clear and convincing evidence that returning the child to the home would not be in the best interests of the child, despite the efforts that have been made by the Department of Family Services. Dispositional orders in CHINS cases are in effect for not more than 1 year and must have a hearing before expiration to determine if another order is needed. The child is usually put on juvenile probation through DFS, and the order terminates when a child reaches age 18. Any parent who willfully violates or neglects or refuses to comply with an order of the court may be found in contempt and punished as provided in 14.6.438, even though a CHINS proceeding is brought against the children. These orders can contain the following. They could require the child to perform community service or work program, could order that the child be examined or treated by a physician. They could place a child in a hospital or medical facility, youth camp, school, or other suitable facility for treatment, could restrict the child's driving privileges, impose any demands, requirements, limits, or restrictions on the child, and order the child or parents or both to undergo evaluation and treatment. The placements in CHINS cases must be least restrictive. They can't be detained in jail or juvenile detention center unless there is also a delinquency action involved. They may be placed in a residential treatment facility, group home, or psychiatric residential placement, and they may be placed with relatives or in foster care. A CHINS child cannot be detained in the Wyoming Boys or Girls School unless they are 12 years old and also found to be delinquent. There also must be specific findings to place a child out of state, which are addressed in 14.6.429A5. If a youth violates probation, the district attorney may file a petition to revoke probation. It is critical that the youth has to follow and comply with all the conditions, no matter what those conditions are. A violation of probation is a violation of a court order and can result in detention. If a child is found to be in violation of probation, the child could face additional or more severe charges or penalties, be placed on a more restrictive level of probation, or be placed out of the home in detention or residential treatment. Next is a review hearing. Review hearings are required to be held every 6 months from the date of the child's removal and every 6 months thereafter. The court has to review the case plan to determine the health and safety of the child, continuing necessity for placement, the appropriateness of placement, reasonable efforts made by the Department of Family Services, appropriateness of case plan and compliance with the case plan, the extent of progress toward alleviating or mitigating causes that necessitated the placement, and the date the child is expected to return to the home or achieve permanency. Permanency hearings are also required in CHINS cases and should be held no later than 12 months from the date of the child's removal and every 12 months thereafter. The purpose of the hearing is to determine whether DFS has made reasonable efforts. Permanency hearings are less common in these types of cases, but can occur, and they're different than 12-month hearings. DFS has to present to the court the efforts made to effectuate the permanency plan, address the options for permanency, examine the reasons for excluding permanency options, and set forth a plan to carry out the placement decision, including specific times for achieving the permanency plan. The court must also present to the court a compelling reason for establishing a permanency plan other than reunification, adoption, or guardianship. This is the hierarchy of permanency that was discussed in the abuse and neglect module. It's the same in Chin's cases. And finally, just another reminder that any of the parties in a Chin's proceeding can appeal, and so you will not be involved in the appeal case as a high-fidelity wraparound provider, but just know that it may occur and may delay the outcome of the juvenile court proceeding. Thank you for listening to this module. A reminder that this is module 3 of 6, and we hope you'll listen to the others.